I'd like to show you guys today very briefly my file organization structure as it stands right now, because it continues to evolve. But here is what I aim to do with my file management system. All of us have multiple projects open all the time. In the world that we live in, it doesn't, like I used to beat my head against the wall fighting to close one project before opening another, but it seems inevitable that we're always going to have multiple balls in the air. You can't avoid it. So we might as well have a way to be able to stay on top of where all of my stuff is for each particular open project, so that I can pick it up and set it down. I can pick it up and I can set it down. And I know exactly where all of my relevant files are in order to make the thing happen, to make the YouTube video happen and not get cluttered up all throughout my computer, etc. So let's check it out. Here we go. This is my current OneDrive. I have 3 top level folders, only 3. These 3 at the bottom I don't use. In fact, I should probably just get rid of them. The personal vault, I don't think you can delete. But anyway, just ignore these. Maybe I'll get rid of those at some point when I feel like I have more than half an hour to do anything. But these are the 3 major top level things that everything falls under. For me, all files fall into one of 3 major categories. So here it is, workbenches. These are my active projects. Yeah. And then I have references. This is much less used. I don't go in here very often at all, but those are this is where I keep if I've created a tool and it doesn't necessarily relate to a specific project, but it's something that I might return to later to be able to use, and I just want to be able to have quick access to it, I know where to go to find it. To be honest with you, I use this so infrequently, I might even just merge it into workbenches, because typically you can always associate a tool with some kind of project that you're working on, even if it's something that's kind of in the background. If it's open, if it's active, even if it's not very actively active, if it's open, that's the best word. I like that word the most. If it's open, it is in workbenches. And then finally, you have archives, which is all the things that you don't want to get rid of the files from them having been opened in the past, but you don't want them in front of you anymore. They're closed. And so this is where so those are the top level structures. Let me go into each one now and show you a little more detail of what it looks like. So workbenches is first. This is the one, as you might expect, has the most activity. The first folder in here I call it Sandbox. This is because I find myself, sometimes I'll need just a quick, like some kind of quick calculations. I'm estimating the maybe how many expenses I have near the end of a month, or I need to compare, like if I'm comparing grades or trying to grade something really quickly, but I need to do it systematically, and trying to do that with my current tools that my school district offers me isn't possible, and I need Excel real quick, but I don't need it to last. It's not a project. It's just like a quick little thing. It's like scratch paper, but for files. So I come into my Sandbox and I can, here's some examples. These can be deleted now. 2025 daily dates for Notion. This is an experiment I was doing where I would create a database in Notion which had every day of the year of 2025, and then I'd fill those dates. Each day would have, if you have a database with all of the days, then you can have for each day, let's say for example, you could track like, okay, how much money did you spend that day? Or how many hours did you work at your second job, which is an hourly paid position, which is the case for me. So it was just kind of an experiment, and I'm still kicking it around in my head. Moving on, we've got all of these projects that are open. I'm aiming to buy a home, and I began that process in September of 2024. I'll explain this little structure here a little more just a second. But within then this project are all of the files that are relevant to that particular goal. I want to buy the house, that is the goal. And within the folder I have these, this one right here is the details of the mortgage itself. And then within here, ADU, this is sort of like a sub project. I originally had this folder out here in workbenches, but then I realized, well, it's kind of a sub project of buying the house. I'm planning to build an ADU on the property, on the born purchase, on the house. And so this is a sub project. So I just moved it within it. And then I have different I have archives, or not archives. Sorry, I was confusing with Spanish. Files in here that are all relevant to that goal. And it's still open. So I put it inside to save myself, to declutter a little bit. And then I've got YouTube. So this is going to be like a very, this is like a long term. I put YouTube 2025 plus because I've done YouTube in the past, but I didn't want all of that nonsense, not nonsense, but it's just like, it's clutter to me now. It's all that stuff from way back from when I was doing it before. I would rather have it cleaned up. So I only have I only want what I want in front of me. That's the only thing I want to see. So this is the last video that I'd completed. This could actually go to archives now. I won't do that right now. Evergreen, that's where I could keep, these are some photos that I can use for thumbnails. And there's a banner here. This, I think, is like I hope it is, it should be not an actual banner itself, because that's not evergreen. Evergreen for this would be like the template for the YouTube banner itself that shows you where to put where the boundary is for mobile view versus desktop view, then versus TV. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but that would be something that would belong in Evergreen. Another thing that might go in here is if you use music for your videos, if you're making YouTube videos, you can keep something like that in here. A lot of services now, you don't even need to save the files, so that might not make sense. You don't want to clutter it up. That's the number one enemy in my philosophy is clutter. Again, this could be archived. And then we've got some other projects here that are going on as well. So that's workbenches. Let's go on to references. This is, like I said, is much like, I didn't even realize I literally have two things in here. I could almost certainly merge this into workbenches. So that's maybe a project for another day. But I'll tell you anyway what are in here. Goal-based financial planning. This was kind of an experiment. It's not something that I'm really using actively right now. But what it was okay, instead of having a budget, where a budget is like, okay, I have this amount of money to spend. This is how much my income is, and these are what my expense categories are. And so this is how much I am freely able to spend. Instead of that, what I was aiming for with this spreadsheet was, okay, what if I wanted to save $10,000 by the end of, say June 2026 or whatever, whatever the case may be. This was something like that, to make it direct toward a goal, tying it back to a goal and making that built into the sort of like the budgeting philosophy, but just a little bit more direct. And then all expenses and estimator. This is actually something that I haven't really used it in a long time, but I bet I could. Here, let's open it up and check it out. All expenses. This is where you can, assuming that you have a home and you bought it for a particular price, you paid a down payment on it. And so now your terms of your mortgage are like this, and then all of the expenses that you have associated with housing, you can estimate here to have a cost of your housing situation. And then your car, if you have a car loan, you can estimate that here. And then and then the rest of the car expenses over here. So I broke it down into like your housing expenses, your vehicle/transportation expenses, and then everything else like groceries, internet, clothing, eating out, whatever. All of that's over here. These are just hard numbers. And I tried to like break it down into what I was actually spending money on. I've done these kinds of things in different ways. And then you tracking with your annual earnings, if you estimate that you have this kind of salary, and you can see whether or not it makes sense to live the way that you're planning to live. If you have this much money coming in and this much money planning to go out, then you want to make sure that that difference is positive and sufficiently large to be comfortable and be moving in the right direction. So that's an example of references, but like I said, that I bet you I could probably merge that too and consolidate, because the more the better. And then archives. Okay, this is probably the most important. And now this is where I'll wrap back to where I mentioned the structure of my naming convention. This is something, naming conventions is something that I discounted for a long time. I didn't think it was, for whatever reason, I thought file management had little to do with naming conventions. Now I see, at least with archiving, it makes a lot of sense. It makes it a lot easier. Each of these folders, maybe it'll help to first explain to you how I used to do this. I used to, when you first opened archives, I would have like 5 major categories, which would be things like administrative, so personal things like the house and the car, insurance, things like that. I'd have professional, so that would be anything with respect to my career, anything with respect to investing, that kind of thing. Maybe personal, so I think I used to keep photos in here, although that too I feel like that we can do better than that. Keeping your photos elsewhere might actually be better. And so it's an ongoing process. I'm still refining all of this stuff, but it's getting pretty good. What I do now is each of these folders, as soon as you come into the top level folder, archives, instead of having 5 major folders to pick from before getting to what you're looking for, you have every single project, basically a project that has been opened in the past. And so it could be as large as, this is my entire degree that I got from the University of Wyoming. I began it in September 3rd of 2014, and then it took 4 years. I mean, all of my files from all of that time are in here, and you see that I have the sub-level structure in here. This is a course, an online course that I had at that time. This is from a ticket that I got at that time. This is from trading, is like referring to trading, day trading, stocks and stuff. And so I have pictures of charts and things in like that in there. And then in here I have, this is an apartment complex that I used to live in. And then we have all of the academic files, so notebooks and calendars, Excel spreadsheets. This is not perfectly organized, but I love that it's all in this one place that I can just kind of throw. I just vomited it into this folder. At this time, I wasn't this organized, so it's nice to just be able to throw it in there. And if I really wanted to dig something out, I could do that, but it's just not worth the time. So that's an example of something that was big. And then I have other things, like maybe this one, for example. This is another apartment complex that I stayed at in Laramie during that time while I was still at UW. Actually, you know what? Because it was 2019, it must have been after. I had already graduated, so that's why it must not be in here. And you can play with these. You can, if you wanted to take this out and it was special enough to bring out to a top level or a secondary level, not top level, but within your archives visible, that it's up to you. But last thing that I'll explain before closing the video is the reason for the order of the naming structure. The year and then the month and then the day makes it so that it will be perfectly ordered in chronological order. And that, I feel, is the most natural and helpful way to organize your archive folder, your massive top-level archive folder, because then you don't have to, the friction of trying to decide what category, administrative, personal, professional, that is all gone. You don't have to worry about that anymore. You just have projects, and you have projects within projects, and each of these you can then play with burying them within each other or taking them out depending on where you want them in the whole structure.